Good to see you, Bhakti. This is session number 8, and the 10 sessions that we have been.
I think it's 7, ain't it?
Is it 7?
7, yes.
Well, I'm trying to cheat you. Session number 7 out of 10 on the subject of meditation, its arts, its science, and also our investigation of the whole process called spiritual self-development. And as always, when we bring up these topics, it causes us simultaneously to explore many other dimensions of our being. Spirituality is like that. And you will recall that from the very outset, we have given spirituality a very different definition than that which tends to make it synonymous with religion. From day one, we wanted to point out the distinction between religion and spirituality. We acknowledge the fact that religion makes its own contribution. Yet we wanted to also recognize that the contribution that spirituality makes to our overall journey as human beings is uniquely distinguishing from that of religion. And I want to remind you that spirituality is not therapy. Many of us confuse the two. Therapy is one thing. It also attempts the same objective that spirituality attempts. Therapy attempts to bring about healing through understanding, through explanation. Spirituality brings about healing through help, through contact with a much higher power that is in you. So the approaches are just a little bit different. The aims, goals, and objective, of course, are the same. And so when we talk about spirituality, we must first talk about a kind of special awakening that occurs within the life of a human being. Earlier I had called it the conversion. It is that experience that turns one toward something higher. Call it God, call it Allah, call it Jehovah, call it the higher self, call it truth. These are just names, all pointing to the recognition that there is the existence of, and more importantly, the need of one coming in touch with some higher power. And why is that? Because fundamentally, spirituality, that awakening that I am calling the birth of one's spiritual faculty opening up, that awakening occurs when one realizes that one is powerless. Powerless. When one encounters something in oneself that is weak, when one encounters that thing within oneself that is the basis for sin. And remember, sin is nothing but the outcome of your weaknesses. Please make a note of that. Sin arises from that part of your being that is weak. Sin arises from that part of you that is imperfect, that part of you that has a fault, that part of you that is flawed. That part of you that produces a kind of failure in your life. And it is therefore the hardest thing to come into a spiritual awakening, because it requires simultaneously acknowledging the existence of this area of weakness in yourself. What the therapists have called your shadow material. All of the imperfections, all of the shortcomings, all of the faults and flaws that are buried deep within us. becomes, for too many of us, our shadow material. We try to keep it in the dark. One of the things that make denial particularly difficult is because we lower the standards of perfection. And if you know from our anger workshops, I have made the statement that none of us are perfect. To be human means to be imperfect. We all have shortcomings. We all have faults. And I remind you that in spite of these imperfections, these shortcomings, and these faults, that we are still worthwhile and have value as human beings. Which means that spirituality teaches you how to live, how to endure your imperfections. Interesting. Not eliminate them. How to endure your imperfections, your shortcomings, and your faults. It is very different from religion. Very different from there. What makes it hard, though, is that we tend to lower the standard of perfection so that we can qualify to call ourselves perfect. We all try to rewrite the standard of excellence and bring it down so that we can go on pretending that we are without flaws, that we are infallible, that we are perfect, that we have no shortcomings, and we have no faults. Thinking that somehow by lowering the standards that we are able to eradicate this shadow material. And of course, one cannot eradicate one's imperfections, one's shortcomings, and one's fault. It is part and parcel of your being. As human beings, we exist on a plane of creation where our fundamental nature is made up of both good and bad. We have both good and bad karma, which means, of course, that out of your good karma, you're bound to do some good things, and you're bound to reap the results of that good action in the form of some pleasant, good, beneficial event occurring in you. And from the bad karma side, you will elicit some bad actions that will produce some suffering in your life. What the Buddha called dukkha. Suffering. Hence, all suffering arises out of this weak side of self that is inevitable and innate. And spirituality then is a training that enables you to endure your dukkha. Not get rid of your dukkha. Because religion's attempt is to get rid of dukkha. Dukkha not going to be removed. Dukkha is built into the experience of being a human being. Suffering is there. It is not coming somewhere from the outside. The outside suffering that you experience is nothing but a manifestation of the weaknesses inside of yourself. But for those of us who have manipulated the standards, we must find someone to blame our dukkha on. Now you blame your dukkha on your wife, or your husband, or your boss, or your neighbor, or this person, or this situation, and that circumstance. You're not able to realize, you're not able to see that the basis of your dukkha, your suffering, is in you, in the form of your own weaknesses, your own imperfection, your own shortcomings, your own flawedness, your own faults. And this makes the dukkha excruciatingly painful. The word dukkha from the Sanskrit is really a beautiful word. Buddha could not have chosen a better word to symbolize and describe what suffering feels like. Dukkha means the dislocation of a joint from its socket. If you can imagine if someone would pull your arm from your shoulder socket, can you imagine the pain?
Yeah, I've experienced.
This is dukkha. Do you experience dukkha? The real stuff. Yes. Dukkha then is like this disjointedness, this disconnectedness, this being torn into piecesness. This is dukkha. When your life feels just torn into chaos, into threads. Therefore, spirituality takes birth with the dawn of one's awakening, one's realization of one's ability to see in one's own imperfections. To see one's own imperfections. To see your own flawedness. To see your own shortcomings. To see your own faults. To see them. To come out of the denial. To drop the pretense. To eliminate all that ego mythology that we create to protect ourselves from the reality of our own weakness. Our own sinfulness. First one has to see. And this is the most difficult. Because, as the poet says, man is the only creature on this planet who tries to play God. Man and woman is the only creature on the planet that tries to play God. Play God in what way? That you are in charge of something. That you are controlling something. You control nothing. Absolutely nothing. And there's a point that you will come to in your life when you discover that you do not control anything. The ancient Greek mystics had a name for this realization. They called it kenosis. Kenosis. When the realization that you don't control nothing. You don't have power, because if you had power and control, you would not have allowed your life to fall into this state. Had you had the power and the control, you would not have allowed this event to have happened that caused you so much suffering. If you had some power control, then you would rise above that weakness in you that is causing you to continually do, say, and experience things that is far beneath your standard as a human being. If it was in your power, you wouldn't shoot the dope. If it was in your power, you wouldn't drink the alcohol. If it was in your power, you would drop the promiscuousness. If it was in your power, you will manifest this perfection. But there comes a point in your life when you realize this is not in your power. And it is this opportunity now that God has to stop in. Only when you realize that you're not God, in the sense that you've been thinking you're God, can this thing called God realization happen to you. So seeing is the first stage of the birth of spirituality. We begin to see these areas of our life that are proof that you're not God. Kenosis. It means emptying out. When one goes through kenosis, it's like a catharsis. You empty out. You get rid of all of that arrogance. You get rid of all that stuff in you that had been deluding you into thinking you were God. Kenosis means you surrender. You bow. You surrender. You acquiesce. You understand that there's a power greater than your little ego that is in charge of stuff. You surrender your ego. Kenosis then means surrender. I love the meaning of kenosis that the early founders of Alcohol Anonymous created. They called it when you bottom out. When you hit bottom. And remember, it is important that you hit bottom. That is the first thing that triggers the alcoholic or the person under the tyranny of an addiction on the stage of recovery, isn't it? You have to bottom out. And in that bottoming out, then you realize your powerlessness. And this realization of your powerlessness triggers in you a opening up to help. This experience of borrowing out creates the context now where you will let God come on the scene. Where you will surrender, turn something over. You have realized your essential and fundamental powerlessness and inability to control. And so spirituality then has its genesis, has its origin in these kind of experiences. And you begin to understand now. You begin to understand. You begin to understand your life better. You begin to understand this world better. You begin to understand your weaknesses, your imperfections, all of these things. And soon that understanding now takes you to a final level where you, for the first time, you can accept yourself. Because normally you don't accept yourself. Why? Because invariably there is some aspect in you that you don't like. I'm not tall enough, I'm not pretty enough, I'm not rich enough, I'm not smart enough, I'm not this enough. There's always some deficient area in yourself that you don't like. And that area that you don't like is always associated with some aspect of your imperfection, your flawedness, your shortcoming, your fault, your weaknesses. And you don't like that. And your whole effort in life is to struggle to transcend that. And then when you bottom out, and then you see it, and you understand it, finally you accept it. And you learn to endure. I'm reminded of a story about a CEO of a large company who was much admired for his drive and energy, his ability to get things done. His leadership of the corporation was always such that the shareholders made money. And one day he was called into the chairman's office, and you had to be there to see this very strange quirk about this man. One tiny weakness that he had was that every time he had to go in to see the chairman, he would piss on himself. Right in his pants. Every single time. And so this time, again, when he went in to see the chairman of the board, again he pissed on himself. And the chairman said, you know, why don't you do something about that? You know, this is getting to be too much. Every time you come in here, you're pissing all over yourself. He says, go see the company doctor, go see a urologist. We got all kinds of health plans, man. You know, go get yourself taken care of. And the CEO said, yes, I'll do that. The next year, when it was time to come before the chairman of the board and again report on the performance of the corporation, the man stood in front of the chairman, and again he pissed all over himself again. And the chairman said, I thought you went to a urologist to take care of it. He said, no, I didn't go to a urologist. I went instead to a psychiatrist, and I'm healed. I ain't embarrassed no more. That's how we are. We are embarrassed about wetting our pants. But you're wetting your pants is a reality. You wetting your pants. Now you need to learn how to deal with it. You're not a genius. Okay, you got to live with that now. You're not a genius. You're not an Einstein. You're not a Mozart. Live with that. Don't be embarrassed. Stop pissing on yourself. Spirituality then enables us to get to that stage of development where we are able to endure our shortcomings. And that's beautiful. To endure your imperfections, to live with it. That's the unique quality of spirituality. So we're going to talk some more today about spirituality and its relationship to meditation, and we will continue to investigate the deeper aspects and mechanics of what happens when one comes to a genuine spiritual path. Now, I've said that when you bottom out, when kenosis occurs, and thank God that one has been given sin. Sin, weaknesses exist for a particular purpose in the overall schemes of things. Interesting. Because one of the most fundamental questions you have always had, that if God is perfect and God is good, why evil? Why sin? Well, when we say evil, we have to understand that all evil emerged from our individual and collective weakness. So your question has to be framed in such a way that it becomes, why did God make us weak? Why did God make you imperfect, flawed, with faults, with shortcomings? Why weak? Why sinful? Why? The reason the mystics say is that because without this weakness in you that will ultimately lead to your failure, you will never turn toward God. Is that right? Only reason you are interested in God because you done failed somewhere. Husband, marriage failed, job failed, business failed, somewhere some crisis has occurred, some loved one has been lost, your health has been lost, you have failed. You realize, I need help. And it is these weaknesses and the inevitability of your failure and the inevitability of your experience of powerlessness and the realization that you're not in control of nothing down here, that creates in you an opening that gives space for God to occur in your life. Otherwise, God would have no way to enter into our lives. God enters our lives through the route of suffering. Suffering is a crack that he can slip into your life. Otherwise, you have no time for God. When things are going good, you have no time. What is this nonsense? God, religion, no time for that. You got plenty of money, plenty of good time, plenty of health, everything is all right, your family is okay, no time for God. You only need God when things are just going wrong, when your life is being torn to pieces. Now God has an opportunity to slip through the cracks. You're ready, you're receptive, you open up. You're ready to receive some help. You acknowledge, I need help. Is that right, Jew? You moving your mouth with and saying those very words along with me. You understand I need help. And remember, until you reach that point where there's that feeling, I need help, you cannot move into a spiritual state. You're still playing God. You don't need God. And remember, when I say God, I am not talking about some entity up in the sky somewhere, behind the clouds with a long white beard. I am not talking about your childhood concept of God. I'm talking about the God that dwells within you. I am talking about that divine power that resides at the core of your individual reality and being. The mystics have always said, since time immemorial, irrespective of culture and irrespective of race, that God lives within the body of man. This is the temple of God, the Nana Ranjan Dede. This body, this very body, is the house of God. And when the spiritual conversion takes place, we get out of the way on the surface of this ego, and we let this power that is in us come out into our life. This power that is splitting your atoms, metabolizing your food, replenishing your cell, healing you, breathing you, is quite capable of running your life, but you never let it out. flawless intelligence that had split you at the time of birth and took you through that long process that resulted in the formation of this human body, that created your mind arose out of it. That which was in you before you even had a mind and had a body and had eyes and had ears and legs and arms and all of your possessions associated with that. That power is in you. And when you no longer believe in the existence of that inner power, then as far as I'm concerned, you are an atheist. You are the true atheist. The power is within. And through spirituality, we open up and allow that power to have your way. And it's so beautiful when I go to these churches and I hear that prayer prayed over and over again. And it doesn't make any difference in what denomination. If it's the Muslims and Inshallah, or the Christian buried in a corner somewhere, invoking God, Lord, have your way. Have your way. Move on in. Move on in here. Have your way with me. That's kenosis. That's surrender. That's the birth of spirituality. And the greatest single response is to meditate. Meditation is the ultimate state of surrender. Meditation is the ultimate state of kenosis. The emptying out, the bowing, to prostrate yourself, to become available, so that this divine energy in you can have its way. Yes, sister?
So there's no need for choice or free will at that point, is there?
You see, sister, this whole thing about choice and free will, these are illnesses that man and woman suffer from. Okay? The sense that I have free will and all of that, comes with the playing of the God game at the level of your ego. We play the God game at the level of our ego. So when this ego is playing this God game, then it insists, it can't let go of my so-called choices, my so-called free will. That there are two fundamental sources in the universe for things happening, power emerging from me and God. You don't understand. You have no power at this ego level. I'm not saying that deep down inside you. I'm saying that when you have moved your identification from the peripheral of your being, where your I is no longer in reference to this ego level, when your I is no longer in relationship to the contents of your memory, that your I is no longer identified and associated with your intellect and all of these other parts of your higher self. Only until your I have moved all the way back to this deep source where again it merges back into God. And you can say, I can do anything. Until your I has merged back into God, that I that is not merged into God is totally impotent. It can do nothing. It is flawed. It is weak. It is sinful. It will fail. And it's when you hit bottom, when you have failed, when you have discovered your powerlessness, that now this whole thing about free will jumps out. It is replaced with have your way. Thy will be done. I have no will. It's not even into that anymore. It's into help. Spiritual awakening is the soul's cry to God, help me. You understand? It is a cry for help. Ego wants explanation, theory, give me some philosophy. You see? It thinks that's what it needs. If I understand a little bit more, I'll be more effective in the use of my power. If I had a little bit more knowledge, I can get this change, get this change, get that change. In a spiritual awakening, the cry is one, help! I need help. When the alcoholic hits bottom, he said, help me stop drinking. I can't stop drinking. I done tried everything I can. I done prayed. I done studied. I done read books. I done 10 classes. And this monster has still dominated me. I surrender. I fail. I empty myself out. I give up. Help me. You see my point? He doesn't say, oh, I still have the free will to drink or not to drink. He's way beyond that. He knows he don't have no more free will to drink or not to drink. That his free will to drink or not to drink was an illusion. It was Maya. It was made of the same stuff that dreams and fantasies are. You see? And we can only see it in the context of our weaknesses. Genuinely. But as I said before, it takes a long time to see that because we tend to flee from that shadow material. We tend to really suppress that stuff. Because if our shadow material crops up into awareness, then we have to admit we're not perfect, that we're flawed, that we have shortcomings and fault. And your ego mythology is too much. You can't believe something wrong with you. Yes, something wrong with you. That's what all the mystics have been trying to tell you. Something wrong with you. As you are. In this lower state of your reality. Something is wrong with you. Something broken in you. Something flawed in you. Find it. Deal with it. You see. But you don't think nothing wrong with you. You think something wrong with everybody else. And remember, it's easy to see what's wrong with other people. Because your whole orientation is looking away from yourself. You never look to yourself. You never introspect. So naturally, focused on everybody else, it's easy for you to pick up their shortcomings, their faults. You can easily find what's wrong with them. And you're not shy to tell them what's wrong with them. You know, this is wrong with you, so-and-so, so-and-so. You see? And in many instances, you're absolutely right. But the question is, what's wrong with you? Something is wrong. Something is broke somewhere. Where's all that dukkha coming from if you're perfect? Where is it coming from? Something wrong with you. And the first time you start seeking to and discover this wrongness, the first thing you find out what is wrong with me is that I can't control you. What's wrong? I don't really have no power. You see, I really don't have no power. It's a very humbling experience. So the sister, the notion of free will drops out. And with that drop out, man and woman cease playing the God game. And now the cry is for help. Now the cry is for forgiveness. Help. I need help. Something has to happen, otherwise I will drink myself to death. Wilson said, etc., about those early members of AA. I can talk to Sadra. He's a counselor and therapist that deals with this particular thing every day, so he could correct me if I've misquoted Brother Wilson. Brother Wilson said about the alcoholic is that either we must find a spiritual basis for living or we will die. An alcoholic, a drug addict, must find a spiritual basis for living or they will die. They will drink themselves to death. And the same is the case with us. You will sex yourself to death. You see, you will chase money to death because that's your alcohol, that's your dope. You think, well, I don't, Bhagwan, you know, and I'm not an alcoholic, I don't shoot dope, so that statement doesn't apply to me. Yes, it does apply to you. You chasing fame, that's your alcohol, it'll kill you. Recognition, you want the world to know about you. Yes, it'll kill you. It's alcoholic. And you need some help. And meditation is the conscious and deliberate positioning of yourself for this flow of help. Meditation is this emptying out. This meditation is saying yes to God. Meditation is a big yes. It is presenting yourself and says, now I will sit here. and I will empty myself out. And that's what the whole process consists of. Emptying the mind. We sit in asana. We take a posture. We sit down. Last time we talked about this being still business and all of that. We sit down and we start emptying this mind. We emptying it out. We're making room for God to flow into us. But how can God flow into you when your mind is just cluttered with so much other stuff? There's no room for God. How can He come in and help bless us? There's no room. So meditation is emptying the mind of all of these thoughts that is crowding out the space for that divine power to contact us. And that's why meditation is the perfect form of surrender. There is no higher form. And so we will talk some about this practice of meditation. I've already said that in meditation, one of the things most essential in the part of meditation that we have called dharana, concentration, the stage right before we come into meditation. And remember, I pointed out a distinction before. I've said that first you learn to concentrate, then you learn to meditate. That concentration is a prerequisite for meditation. But we call the whole process meditation, even including the actual physical sitting on the floor. But technically, the only part of that whole process that is truly meditation happens after one has mastered concentration, or what the mystics have called dharana. And for this dharana then, something is very important in order for your dharana, your concentration to be successful. And one of the things we talked about before when we're looking at the namas and the niyamas, if you recall, and one of them was what the old mystics out of African India called Iswara Pranidhana. Iswara Pranidhana means devotion, worship, for God. It's like an attitude that you have to have for your meditation. You have to have something that to turn the mind to. You see? And that mind has to be in a spirit of devotion. You see? This attitude has to be there. You have to understand that when you sit, you are sitting to get some help. You understand? That has to be your attitude. Let me sit down and get some help. I need some help. I need some of this stuff to come up. I need some help. That frame of mind must be there. It shouldn't be mechanical. You know, oh, I'm going to sit down, give me some supernatural power so I can read people's mind. I mean, no. Wrong attitude to bring to meditation. That attitude, nothing will get produced anyhow. The attitude that must prevail when one sits in meditation is the same feeling that you should have when you get down on your knees in prayer. It is the same feeling you should have when you lay prostrate in your salat. Same feeling should be there. Shouldn't be mechanical. Shouldn't be drudgery. Oh, let me get down now and make myself better. I mean, look at that. So the attitude has to be right. You know, when you sit. And then when you sit, you need something to direct that attitude in the form of your attention onto. So you need an object to concentrate on. An object of concentration. And this was the whole beginning of idols and icons. These idols and icons were simply to be symbols of that divine thing that you're trying to allow to flow into your life for purposes of collecting your wayward mind. So one would look at an idol and then internalize the vision of that idol and focus the inner attention onto that idol to the exclusion of all other activities. It was to bring that mind into one pointed concentration on God. In the Bible, you remember they admonish us to worship the Lord with all thy heart, thy might, thy soul, etc., right? So the ideal of meditation is to put your whole mind on that. Your whole mind, all your mind, on God. Or that thing that is functioning as a symbol of God. And one of the things that function very effectively as symbol of God are what we have called mantras. Mantras are really names of God. Many mantras. But by focusing on mantras that you understand to be the names of God, you see, it enables you to focus onto God. Sitting down in meditation, we begin to put all our mind on these mantras, all our mind on God, to the exclusion of all else. And that it becomes the biggest struggle. Because as we attempt to do that, we find that this mind keeps drifting. We keep drifting. And for those of you who are not meditators, today I thought what I would do is just to give you, those of you who have the technique, of course you already know what I'm talking about. For those of you who don't know how to do these things, to give you just a little taste, a little generic experiment with the waywardness of your own mind, so that you too will become convinced, like us, of the necessity for dealing with this thing. So the mantra becomes one of the things that we need to have. That's one of the tools for this practicing of surrendering, you see, our mind, our concerns, our attention, all of that stuff. June, you talked about free will. It is surrendering and disciplining that free will. You see, holding it right there, fully concentrating onto that particular thing. So we need an object to occupy our attention at the time of concentration. And one of the most powerful objects to absorb our attention is mantras. The tradition, we call that simbra or japa. And remember, it is calling upon the Lord. These mantras are very often, as I said before, the names of God. So when you repeat a mantra, it's like calling upon God. It's invoking God. It's calling God, calling down. Help, I need help. You understand? Each name, you see, is to be understood as one of the aspects of God that you're trying to invoke for purposes of helping you. Of helping you. And so there has to be a kind of devotion, a love and devotion. Maharaj used to always say, do your meditation with love and devotion. It should not be dry. It should not be mechanical. It should not be routine. You see? It should be full of love and tenderness. 1 minute of this kind of meditation with love and devotion is worth more than 10 years of dry mechanical meditation. You see? So we have to bring this love and devotion to this practice. Boy, I'm way over, huh? Way over. Why don't we take our break? Is I'm too far below? Okay. All right.
About 10 minutes.
All right. We said no, my clock must be wrong. What is the next thing that we need to do? Well, first let me give you a taste of meditation. But I want you to understand something. I've said already that God is in this body. This is the temple of God. So your meditation, your dharana has to occur in this body. It is not possible to worship God outside of this body. Please make a note of this. You can't do it. He is not in the bricks. He is not in the temples, the mosque, the guwaras, the physical church. He's inside of perhaps a person in that church, yes. But he's not in the bricks. So to worship God, to invoke God, to meditate, you have to go inside of this body. And we talked last time about different points in this body, didn't we? Right? In the what we call chakras, centers. Right? Inside this body, it has been taught by those who know that the place that our practices have to begin is at a point right between and above the two eyes. Right? Who that look like? Anybody?
Nothing human.
Nothing human, right? But a point called the third eye. Our ancestors call it the eye of Heru. It is that eye of single fills the body with lights that is talked about in these Christian literatures. In the yoga scholars, it is the Ajna chakra. This is the point that we have to bring the attention inside. This is the seat where the mind, in soul, and remember by soul I mean consciousness. Because remember, the mind has no independent consciousness of its own. Please understand that. The mind is not independently conscious. The mind reflects the consciousness of the soul, much like the moon reflects the light of the sun. The moon has no light of its own. Similarly, there is no independent light in the mind. It is at this point in the human body where mind meets soul, and therefore mind gets enlivened. Mind is made conscious. And therefore, all of your experiences that you are having in this world ultimately is processed through this point. If you look for the point where all of your hearing comes to, you hear a sound out there, and if that sound travels past into your body, pierced your skin, pierced the ears, travels into the brain, ultimately that experience that is coming through your ears gets processed here. Whatever you feel ultimately gets processed through here. Everything that you are calling experience gets processed through this point in the body. It is the central office in the body that dictates all of our experience. So when we are going to go into the body, this becomes the door. Very often it has been called the 10th door. You hear mystics talk so much about this 10th door. We know about the other doors. Those are the doors out of which attention flows. The two eyes, the nostrils, the two ears, the mouth, the lower apertures. This is the 10th door that it has to come back in. This is the door that Jesus talked about, knock it, and it shall open. What is that knocking at the door? It is to bring it in your attention. Every time it goes out, bring it back. You're knocking at the door. It'll go out again, bring it back, knock again. And as you continue to do this, this door will open up into you, and you will find the source of your help. So you have to locate this point, and so you have to feel it. So what we're going to do is that I'm going to make sure that you understand when you're doing your simran, when you're doing japa. Most of us are doing japa in your throat. You're not doing japa here. Japa is to be done here, not in your throat. You're still doing your japa with your mouth. You see? You still feel your tongue hitting your teeth. You see? Your japa is in your throat. Your japa has to move here. You have to make the mind repeat these mantras, these words of haku, these holy words. The feeling has to be that the words are being repeated here instead of here. You have to actually feel the simran going on here in the body. So what you need to do those of you who know what I'm talking about, I want you to just quietly for a moment, just sit in your chairs, close your eyes. And those who have mantras, I want you to begin to repeat the mantras. Those of you who don't have a mantra, let me give you an exercise for concentration. And all I want you to do is something very simple. I want you to sit quietly, close your eyes, and I want you to count and recite the alphabet simultaneously. Just A1, B2, C3, D4, and so on. And your mind will drift. And you'll get lost, take my word. And every time your mind goes off of the simple concentration on this process, A1, B2, C3, D4, until you go to the end of the alphabet. And then repeat. And I will come by, and then I want to make sure that you feel where your eye center is at. So, Bilal, if we can do that for a minute. And those of you who have your Simran, please, don't say this out loud. Everybody else, just close your eyes. Because I want you to get used to finding your eye center. And so, I just want you to feel where it should be at. You see, so that you'll know the proper place where your Simran should be. It's just, and you don't strain your eyes. You want to feel that it is this part of you that is actually doing the repetition. That is your brain, the tongue of your brain is repeating. And you should feel it there. No strain on the eyes. It's above the eyes. Above the eyes. You can't even see it with your physical eyes. And it is there that one's attention has to be focused in this body. Right above the eyes, between the eyebrows. That's where you're trying to focus your attention. And you don't want this attention to fall down into the body. You don't want to start being more conscious of your feet, your leg, your butt. That's what you've been doing. Simply try to be only conscious of this part of the body. That is the, it's not chocolate, that is the eye center. And that is where you're trying to bring your attention all the way back into your body, up to this point in the body. And continually hold it there. And by holding it there, you're able to open up your inner vision. No strain again with the physical eyes. The pupils will move naturally. That's normal. That's just physiology. Let the pupils move sideways, up, down. Don't even be concerned about your eyes. Those eyes are not going to see anything. When the mystics talk about internal visions, the seeing of lights, the seeing of past saints, mystics, they're talking about the seeing that is occurring with this eye of Peru. Your physical eyes can see nothing. Your physical eyes were put together to see outside of you. To see inside of you, a different eye is required. And you can't open that eye if you don't know where that eye is at. So I want you to have a very existential experience of where and how to locate this point. And once you're able to locate this point, then you just bring your attention there. And this becomes your mouth. And it's from here that you repeat your mantras. Not in any lower part of yourself. Just between the eyes, brows, right above the eyes. This is the seat in the physical body of the mind. And remember, you can't do anything with your mind if you don't start working on it from this point. It is very difficult, I agree. 1,000,000 times it will run in and out of this. 1,000,000,000 times it will go back down, not only into other parts of your body, but it'll leave your whole body, go back into the world, back to the job, back to the factory. And you must retrieve your attention, bring it back out of the world, back up through this body, back up to this body. Again and again until you're able to open up that inner space. So you must be able to feel in yourself. This is the spot. This is the true rumba of bronze. In all temples, they reflect the inside of your head, hence their dome shape, the oval shape. The head is the true minaret. It is the true mosque. It is the true church. The idea was to convey to those people coming into the church that when you step into church, you should have the experience of stepping into your home. You should have the experience of being at the IC. This is the place that the soul rested at when it first entered your body from the top of your head. This is where it descended. It did not descend any further down. All other experiences picked up in your body are processed at this point in the body. This is the seat of operation of consciousness in the physical body. And this is where you must be. You've been so accustomed to seeing with your physical eyes that it takes a little while to get used to not trying to look inside with your physical eyes. Not to do that. Now just for a few minutes now that everybody know where that place is at, I want you just for a few minutes to practice concentrating there. Sit there at that point in the body, do your mantra, or involve yourself in this simple process of counting and reciting the alphabet. And we will do that for just 2 or 3 minutes so that you can get a sense. All right. That's good. I'm glad I don't hear nobody snoring, so this must be an advanced class, huh? But I want you to begin to get familiar with this, the physiology of meditation. Because this is the most difficult part. The most difficult part of all meditational practices, all yoga, all spiritual system is to be able to hold the attention here. It is absolutely the hardest part of the practice. It is really hard. So you mustn't get discouraged. You know, 1 billion times your mind will run away from this point. Now, the use of the mantra is very powerful because it gives us a very powerful symbol to help focus us at this point. It gives us a devotional component. One of the other things beside mantras that has been used is what the mystics have called dhyan. Dhyan is the use of some object to visualize, to focus the mind's tendency to visualize. Attention flows along two courses. The attention tends to hear, to listen, therefore to hear, and to see, therefore to visualize. And we have to engage both of these tendencies in the mind to bring it into a state of concentration. The mantra, by repeating and listening to the repetition of that mantra, you are involving the listening tendency of the mind. Because remember, essentially, how do you experience your thoughts? Through listening. You hear yourself think. And once you listen to yourself think, it generates the whole experience of the world. Scientists who works very closely with the mind discovered that fundamentally all physical sensorial experiences are heard. Strange. If you have the tenacity to focus in very closely on the physics of perception, but you will discover that ultimately you would hear a final faint comment on everything. Oh yeah, what Bhagwan said, that was deep. Oh, that shows a pretty girl. Ooh, this show tastes good. There's always a final summary of experience here that really constitutes your whole worldly experience. You experience the world through sound, through listening. It's very profound. Very profound. And you find that you can't do anything without first speaking it. Hence in ancient African mysticism, we talk about Tahuti, we talk about Jehuti, or however you wish to pronounce it, and that it was at this level that creation was spoken to being. In all of the cosmologies, in all of the scriptures, creation is always talked about in terms of it being spoke into existence. Because you also say to yourself, I'm so hungry, let me get one of those cookies over there. And that is what enables you to move and direct your movement. I'm so tired, let me lay down and go to sleep. You understand? First you speak every action into being, however subtle, and you don't know that. So you will have no movement toward anything in this world. Nothing can happen without the spoken word. But guess what? That spoken word is going on continuously. And this was the insight of the ancient African sages, is that this very phenomena that we speak of in Genesis and in so many various scriptures that was there at the beginning of creation, that process goes on continuously. You are continuously speaking your experience into existence. Interesting. The Tahuti part of you is still speaking your experiences. Everything you do. So-and-so, so-and-so, I'm going to get them. And then your body obeys. Let there be revenge. You see? Let there be eating. You know?
Thought first?
That's all thoughts are. Thoughts are nothing but what? Phonetic sound symbols. You have to understand this here. Thoughts are sounds. They're sounds that we have given meaning to. Think about it. Thoughts are sounds that we give meaning to. My voice, this is a sound. The words that we call words is just a sound. Word is nothing but a sound. What else is words other than sounds? And then we give these words meaning. But fundamentally, it's nothing but sound. Sound with meaning. Thoughts is nothing but sound with meaning. Yes?
Yes, Bhagwan, you were making the point of saying that when we're doing Simran, that we're doing it mechanically, if we're doing it from our throat.
The point I was making about the Simran and the repetition earlier was that when you do your japa, you do your mantra, when you repeat it with your mouth, your attention is at a lower chakra. There's no door there. When you do your Simran, your japa here, it will generate a lower experience. Doing it here, for instance, you will go into some sub-astral regions. when people, for instance, say that they go into meditation and they get focused in this chakra, remember this is the chakra that generates your dreams. Normally we're sitting here right at the eyes, and I don't want you to confuse it. There's this eye level. At the level of eyes, this is what produced the waking experience. This level here that I'm talking about, the third eye, is the super-consciousness. Once you drop beneath these eyes down to the throat center, then you're into the subconscious. Okay? And then when you drop even further down to the heart center, then you go into the unconscious. All right? And these are the three states that we move through on a daily basis. So when your attention get collected here, right, you go into this subconscious or dream state. And it just generates that. You want to not go to sleep. You want to go full. You want to wake even more than you are in this level.
Talk about the actual stating of sunrise. That's kind of difficult because even when you try to say it mentally, when your attention slips out, you find that if you say it in your throat, then you seem to hold on to it longer.
Nothing wrong with that. What I'm simply saying is that the goal should be to practice until you get to a point where you're not even feeling the throat. You won't even be conscious of the mouth. You should be not conscious of anything going on in the body.
Because I remember reading in that in Live to Die, that session on sunrise, someone had asked a question about when you're doing sunrise, is it okay to see the words? And sometimes I can see the words. I think he was saying that that's not a good idea.
No.
Not to see the words.
Not to even try to visualize.
But at this point, that's the closest I'm coming to not saying it in my throat is to see it.
Well, what the old mystics used to do, the desert fathers in ancient Egypt, when the Christian church was still full of mysticism and the great science of it. And what those desert fathers used to do was that they would go out in the deserts of Egypt. And that became like the laboratory, if you will. That's why if you go into these deserts, you see all of these caves and things, because that was where any decent mystic is going to go to test out the path. And one of the reasons that they were going to the desert is to acclimatize the body for japa. And they will go in the desert and they will first do their japa at the level of the throat. And they will scream it out as loud as possible. And you would just go on doing that, repeating your japa. Loud as you, at the top of your voice. Because the ideal, and they would do it in their cave, because the ideal is for now that japa to penetrate your whole body. Your whole body. Now, when you shout japa, because the volume of your voice goes up, you'll feel a vibration moving through your body. Okay? If you're sensitive. You can actually feel like you feel Aretha Franklin when she hit that note, right? You start reeling and rocking. It's like you actually can feel it. Some of those of us who are sensitive to the music, when you hear something pretty, you ever notice how you tremble in your knees? There's other occasions when you tremble in your knees than just what you've been trembling in your knees. I mean, music can make you tremble in your knees. You get a trembling. Well, when those desert mystics would shout japa, and they will fill the body up so that the body will feel it. Then, as you shout it all the way out at your maximum, then you start slowly withdrawing. First, you stop shouting with your mouth. And now your mind is just shouting inside. Shouting. Loud. Shouting. And why did they turn up the volume on their japa? So that you can get, it's easier to focus your attention. You may be saying your japa so low that you can't even hear it. You can't focus on it. So they would turn that volume up, physically, then mentally. And then it would get to a point where even when they're silently doing their japa, and they could tell when it's right because the body would still be trembling. This is called kriyas. When we talk about kriya yoga, I don't know how familiar you are with that, but kriyas occur because the body trembles. You'll see the body start shaking, you know, when the japa is mature, because it's still a sound, an unstopped sound, unutterable sound, a sound that is not made with the mouth at all. And so you're right, Pam, that in the beginning we have to start with the mouth. But the ideal is to slowly move to here. Because, you see, when you think, is your mouth moving?
That's what I was about to ask.
No,
that same place
it doesn't think.
That forms
The same
thoughts
place where you are thinking, that is the seat that you have to do the job of. When you are sitting there thinking, so-and-so, sure get on my nerve, your mouth is not even moving. Is that right? But you're talking, you're speaking, right? At that's the place that you do your submission. That's effective. You see, that's effective. But it takes a little while to get there. You see. So that's the whole ideal behind that. So you want to be able to sit here at the eye center. And it's from here. And first you have to engage this tendency in the mind to chatter and talk. Because that's all we do all the time. We're constantly talking to ourselves, continuously, in the form of commentations. And we comment on everything. Because without commentating, we can't have experience. So this inner commentator inside of us has to be engaged. Now, when you get very sensitive meditation, you will find out that there are essentially about 10 levels of this commentary going on. There's the commentator, and then there's the commentator on the commentator. When you're doing your sermon or something and you say, boy, you just missed a word. Boy, I'm not missing. Who is that? That's the one that should be doing the repetition. At that level, that commentator saying, oh, my attention went out again. Damn. You see? It's commenting. That is the one to be engaged in the sermon. And when you engage that one, then there's another one. There's about 10 levels. So it's quite a thing. But the point is that you want to get to that point. You see the difference? Yeah. And so when we are able to do that, we have effectively engaged that quality of mind that want to think. The other one is the mind tends to visualize forms. And so the mystics say, therefore, you needed something to engage that. For that, they talked about Guru Bhakti. They talked about the visualization of the form of the Guru to occupy the mind's tendency to visualize. And so with the Guru image in the mantra, you have now two components to fully occupy those two tendencies in the mind. So this Simran and Dhyan, this mantra japa, and this visualization of the form of the master are the very good tools to use. Of the two, the most essential is the mantra. You see. The most essential is the mantra in the beginning stages. There's a third one, and I think we'll talk about that after break. And then we'll do perhaps a few more little small exercises. All right, we will resume at 5 to 2 or there 3 and continue. And our discussion on this very important topic called meditation. And we've already begun to look at so many things. We looked at the why, and now we're trying to look at the how-to of meditation. Now, for those of you who are doing just the simple exercises of counting, did you notice how you wind up with a complete alphabet and not enough numbers? Did you notice that? It was the difference between the number of the alphabet counted and the numbers arrived at was the measurement of the drift of your mind. Okay? And that happens on a larger scale when we practice the meditation. And you remember from last time that we understood that for most of us, to simply be able to meditate at all is just a miracle. Consider it. You see? Yes, Kiba.
At some point, fear sets in when I'm losing control.
Yes.
I mean, it's that, and I understand what's happening, and so I'm able to work through that, but it's like you're losing control at some point, and you got that desire to be in control all the time.
Yeah, I did that and kind of put on brakes like,
I
don't want to go.
You didn't want to go.
Yeah.
Yes. All of these kinds of experiences, particularly when one starts having the experience of bodilessness, it feels like dying. Hence, they have called it very often dying while living. You see. But there is some fear. There is some fear involved in it. Because again, it's the experience of loss of control. I mean, you're giving up. Remember I said it's the ultimate act of surrender. You are surrendering. You are literally surrendering. and you're sitting there and you're giving this thing up. So it becomes like a death in many respects. So that's normal. You're going to bound to have some fear. And then there's the unknown, you see, that is also there. And whenever we move toward the unknown, there's always some initial element of fear. So what I think we will do with the rest of the time here is to now, to address some practical questions that may have arisen out of your effort at meditation. And then in the next session that we go through, we'll go a little bit deeper again into some sitting things and listening things. But let's use the rest of this time just to answer and deal with any practical questions that you've had related to your meditation or anything that I've said, because we said so much. We said a lot of stuff here. And I want to give you an opportunity to digest and respond to it and try to prepare yourself for the rest of the challenge along the way. So, or we can meditate some more, huh? We can always meditate some more. Because that should be the aim now. How to meditate. That's the name of the game. You have to find a way to allow that inner source of that we call God, that dwells in the deepest, most places in your being. You have to find a way to liberate that God, the power in you. Meditation is the only way to liberate that power of God that lies dormant within us. You see, it's the only thing that can help us. It's the only thing that can get you out of this weak state that we're in. We talked so much already about the fact that we are all weak. Your imperfections render you weak. All that is wrong in your life, you cannot correct it. By definition, you're just a purely human being like the rest of us. And unless you can open up and release that God that is indwelling in you, then you will perish. Remember, Wilson said, unless we establish a spiritual basis for our life, we will die. You're going to die in this dukkha. You're going to drown in this dukkha. Life is never going to be right. So we have to find a way to really establish a spiritual basis for living. Now, how many of us truly have really established a spiritual basis for living? We're trying to get an economic budget together, and nothing wrong with that. But the trouble with approaching life from the material side is that the more you possess, the more you are possessed. It's a two-way street. Your possessions will own you. Just to be able to maintain them, it will dominate your time in such a way you have no time for this. Right? So you can't solve your problems like that. You can't possess your way out of dukkha. It just creates more dukkha. Right? So how do we establish a spiritual basis? How do you establish meditation? What are the things you must do?
Discipline.
Of course. First step is discipline. In fact, the word disciple and discipline has the same root. We must discipline ourselves. We talked about that last time a little bit, didn't we? Right? You got to sit down and make yourself available to be helped. So we have to discipline ourselves. We have to be available. We have to be there. And we talked about that in the last session in great detail. So the thing is that to move from where we are at, you see, deeper and deeper into the spiritual life. And that becomes the task. That becomes the challenge. Yes, sister.
Yes. I'd like to ask, is good karma outside of grace? Is there an area of grace that precludes karma if it's good?
Well, it depends on what we call grace, because you see, very often, Pam, what we call grace and what God sends His grace are sometimes entirely two different things. A lot of the tragedy that we suffer are in fact grace of God. Because what do you think we mean by grace of God? Grace of God is God taking the initiative and bringing you closer to itself. To bring you closer to itself. To bring you back. Right? How do God do that? I've said at the top of the discussion that God is available, gets through us through our cracks. When there's a crack in your life, God comes through there. So whatever very often is sent to crack your head open is grace. So sometimes that illness that you think shouldn't be happening is God's grace. Because had God not gave you that illness, then you would have never turned. That bankruptcy, those financial problems, that all of the things that you've been calling the result of my bad karma may in fact be the grace of God. How do we tell whether it's the grace of God or just bad karma? It is the grace of God because when it moves you closer to it. That thing is grace of God that creates in you a desire to move closer to God.
And this is bad karma if you feel no need.
That's right. So bad karma can be that Mercedes-Benz that has convinced you don't need no God in your life. You see? Although it looks good, it could be bad. So that is really the distinction between good and bad karma. See, we define good and bad karma on the basis of our personal likes and dislikes. That has nothing to do with good or bad karma. That's relativistic. That's individualistic. That varies from person to person. Good karma is those events that occur in your life that reveals your flawedness, your imperfection, your weakness. Those events that occur in your life that trigger in you to cry help, that's grace. Those events that occur in your life that gives you the illusion that you don't need nobody, that you don't need God, and that you're perfect and ain't nothing wrong with you, nothing is flawed in you. That's some bad karma from a divine perspective. Good karma is to be able to come into contact with the teaching. Do you know how rare that is? That's very rare. There will be people, many people, who live their whole life and will never come in contact with teachings. Just rare. Just a few lucky souls even hear about the existence of higher teachings. The greatest grace of God is to be able to practice. The greatest grace of God is when you find yourself alive tomorrow morning and your eyes open up and there's an opportunity for you to sit and meditate. There is no greater grace than that. That is the ultimate. Nothing beyond that. Top shelf stuff. Right? That's why the mystics have said that when we sin against our own meditation, now that can't be forgiven. Because your forgiveness comes through the act of meditation. Now what can you do? What can you do? We have turned down our own salvation. So the ultimate grace of God is that we find ourselves in those situations and circumstances in our life where we can meditate. The most tragic life is that life that is so compound, so complex, so submerged in illusion that there's no time to meditate. That's a very tragic life. You know what you say, June? But our meditation, you see, doesn't become the most important thing in our life until we have actually had the spiritual awakening that I talked about earlier. Is that true? until you've hit rock bottom, until kenosis has occurred, until everything that could go wrong has went wrong, until all of that has happened. Then you see, that fire is not in you yet. That thirst is not there. You see, it has to really be life and death. They say that religion is for those who don't want to go to hell. Spirituality is for those who've been to hell and ready to get out. Therein lies the difference. Spirituality appeals to those who've had enough. They've had enough. And they can't get out. They need help. And they have to go within. Even to still this mind, you feel helpless sometimes, don't you? Try as much as you like. God, you can't make this mind be still. And you find yourself even in that, in meditation, having to still call on some higher power and say, please make this mind still. You know? So in every step of our life, we have to have help. And the person that pursues the path of spirituality simply acknowledges this. That's all. We accept the fact. We need it. And then on that understanding, we're able to take a different relationship to our lives. That has to be the understanding. Yes?
So Bhagwan, you're saying that you won't be able to experience the true spirituality unless you go through them?
Probably hell will generate the basis. That sounds like such a dramatic statement. I don't know if I want to sign on to that. That is some scary stuff. But what I'm saying that in a sense, metaphorically speaking, when you really understand the kind of mindset that represents a spiritual seeker, you almost always find that person seeks God as a solution to their problems, you know, in life, as an answer, as a need. And let me put it like this, sister: it's not much difference between the whole process of recovery that you see in alcoholism. See, I don't know. You have to have known somebody that's been alcoholic or on drugs or have had to have personal experience. It's very difficult to couch it in words, particularly when we talk about spirituality. You know, just that we're sitting here trying to discuss it is miraculous. Because the reality is that it's nothing that cannot be put into words at all. In fact, there's an old proverb that says, he who knows does not say anything about it. And he who say anything about it do not know. You see. And in some sense, it's very true. Once our opponent was asked about this same predicament. Why can't anything be said about it? If you know it, why can't you talk about it? Seems to me if you know a thing, you should be able to discuss it. And our opponent says, look, he says, do you know how a rose smells? And the students say, yeah, we know how a rose smells. He said, now talk about it. And they all shut up. Because you can't even talk about how a rose smells. You know it, but what can you say? Spirituality is sort of like that. But we have to say something. But please remember, whatever is being said is bound to be inaccurate. In the same sense as any words used to describe the smell of a rose won't be all yours. Yes, sister?
So, is God all right with the fact that because we don't want to suffer, we will go there? I mean, we will go to it?
You have no other option.
But it's out of fear that we go.
It's out of suffering.
Yeah, and that's a fear because you don't want to suffer.
It's a beginning.
You go.
The journey won't end there. You see, there are some rare souls that are not like that, but rare. So rare it doesn't even really count to speak of them. You see, just that there are some people who never got trapped in alcoholism in the first place, right? There are those souls who are just born lovers. Bhakti yogas, we call it. You see? But you have to understand, for the Bhakti yoga, this what you call life is even more full of suffering than your life. Your suffering is the result of failed expectation, frustrated ambitions. The Bhakti yoga's misery is far greater than yours, and it has nothing to do with failure. The Bhakti yoga got all the money. They got your so-called worldly success. These Bhakti yogas may have been a Bhakti yoga like Janaka, king. All the money in the territory. All the women he wanted. Buddha had all the women he wanted. But he was a Bhakti. You have to have God. Even a kingdom without God is painful. You see the difference? So Bhaktis have their own suffering. In fact, Joe, you don't know nothing about suffering. I don't know nothing about suffering. Ask Hafiz. Hafiz says that God, he says, you are the most cruel and brutal person that I've ever encountered in my life. And why did Hafiz charge God with brutality? He said, because you have given me eyes and you refuse to show yourself to me. So what good are these eyes? And he began to pluck his eyes. You see? Ears, and I can't hear you. What good are these ears? And he just start cutting them ears off. Hands that can't touch you. I don't need, what am I going to do with some hands that can't touch you? You see? Very different kind of suffering. Our suffering is because our little attempt to play God failed. Now you go into suffering because of that. But the bhaktis are different. So their pain is a little different. Their suffering is a little different. You see? It's not from lack of, it's for overabundance. Just the opposite. When you really love something, now just being separated from the beloved is too painful. Too painful. When you really in love, now just even the thought of being separated from the beloved is dangerous. Every moment of separation from the beloved is death. We see it even on the ordinary level. Once upon a time, we were all in love. Remember, years and years ago, and what it felt like? You know, that pain of separation, what they call barah, this intense moment. So, some souls, you see, suffer because of their spiritual maturity.
Why were we separated?
Why were we separated? These are questions you see that, actually, to be honest with you, have no answers. They are inscrutable. Buddha would say, it's not even a real question. Buddha would say, you are separated. It is a fact. You are in suffering. Just deal with the suffering. We answer the other questions. Why were we separated? It is a question that man and woman have been asking since time before. The reality is that, first of all, you are not separated. You don't even think you are. That's the first thing. But that kind of answer is meaningless to you because it does not destroy your experience of being separated. But that the mystics say you need to have an experience. There are certain questions that can only be answered with an experience. They can't be answered any other. You see? And this question that you have asked is one of those questions that can only be answered via an experience. Hence the existence of meditation. I will simply tell you that if one plunges deep into meditation, when you emerge out of that, you won't have no more questions. I can guarantee you. All your questions, no more questions. No more questions. I can't guarantee you that if you read a mountain of books or attended 1,000 workshops like this, these workshops might generate more questions than you had when you first came here. But meditation wipes away. Why? Because that very mind that is asking the question is wiped away. What is it that asks the question? It's your mind. That mind will be consumed in meditation. There will be nobody to ask questions. Very different. Very different. So this meditation, this art of going within our own human body, and they're tapped into the source of divinity that lies at the core of our being. That whole process has been defined by all mystics as being the single most important thing that we can do as a human being with our life. And that this is the only thing ultimately that will happen. Yes, sister?
Oh, Bhagwan.
Yes, sister.
Could you explain to us what it's like when you go inside and meet your God self? And is it like out of body experience or something? Like do you meet or do you see other beings?
But that's a loaded question because to answer it will be the presumption that I can do all these things. And if I don't answer it, then you'll
I thought you
well,
could
Not.
well, let us say what the saints have said about it. It depends, you see. One of the disciples of one of the great masters, Baba Jamal Singh, one of his and Baba Jamal Singh, when he was a disciple, and after he had been given initiation and shown the technique for going inside, used to meditate, for years and you see, and he finally went to his master and said, Maharaji, he says, I've been working so hard with this ceremony, but I've been doing my meditation. I've made no progress. And the master said, no, what are you talking about? He said, you've gone very high inside. Way almost to the topmost level of consciousness. Just a few more steps and your journey is complete. Now, Baba J. Marcin said, what is this nonsense you're talking, man? I close my eyes, nothing going on, man. Take my word for it. Right? And Baba G said, sit down, let me tell you. He says that every time you sit, your soul rises up. I have personally interfered with your conscious experience of it. Because if you were conscious of how far you went inside, I could get no work out of you. You will not go through any more of your philosophy, and you will have to come back to this one. I myself have been holding back your rewards. You see. Sometimes, you see, sister, the Lord put blindfolders on us. Because certain karma that you have to go through requires your ignorance. Another story comes to mind about the great Zen master Matsu. And when Matsu was a disciple, he was a fanatic about meditation. He was a meditation junkie. Every hour that Matsu had, he would spend meditating. And one day, Kuei-jin, the chief disciple of Matsu teacher, saw him sitting like Buddha. And he asked Matsu, he said, Matsu, why this compulsive meditation? You see, what is it that you're trying to become? And Matsu told Kuei-jin, he says, I'm trying to become a Buddha. You see? And Kuei-jin said, I see. And so Kuei-jin sat down and grabbed the brick and he started polishing. Hours went by, disturbing Matsu meditation. He said, Kuei-jin, what are you doing? All this noise? He said, he said, I'm making a mirror out of this book. Matsu said that, don't you know you can rub this brick till in a time and it will not become a mirror? He said, how so then can you meditate and become a Buddha? And of course, these are different kinds of understanding. Sister, it is not our meditation that gets us anything. That's the first mistake in virtue. Because you're still playing God if you think that. Meditation now is just another ego trip. Now you're going to use meditation as a vehicle to enact your will. Buddhahood is a result of grace. Has always been. Always will. All progress inside is simply a result of grace. What is meditation? It is to make yourself receptive to the grace. That's why all of the mystics, all of the saints have said that without this grace of God, without the grace of the Master, you're going nowhere. You can do all the simmering and budging that you like. You'll go absolutely nowhere. Your faith will be the same as that of the man who rubs a brick. It is grace. Think about it. That thing that created you. Now, what did you do to come into being? Nothing. Your very existence is grace. At every stage, it is grace. And nothing but grace. Grace in the beginning, grace in the middle, grace in the end. All grace. But meditation is nothing but making ourselves receptive to the grace of God. That is all. Meditation breaks down our egos. Meditation breaks down our egos, breaks down our walls that we've built. June talked about the separation. Our minds have separated. Our minds build up this separation. It doesn't exist in reality. Yes, sister.
When you meditate, isn't that the Creator talking to you? And when you pray, that's you talking to the Creator?
Actually, it's a conversation with yourself. Ultimately. Yes, poetically speaking, yes, we can divide it up into that. Nothing wrong with that analogy if it inspires you. You see? But at the highest level, sisters, when you ask, what do you see inside? Do you see other saints? Do you see other masters? You see all kinds of things. Yes, you can see Jesus. You can see Buddhas. You can see past lifetimes. You can see the husband, the wife, the children that you've had. The question is that most of us are not ready for that. If you've known that the son that you're raising 2 lifetimes ago raped and murdered you, that would affect your mother. You see? That kind of knowledge, therefore, has to be reserved from us until we are able to reach a level of spiritual attainment where we understand karma. Not just intellectually, but we can actually go through the karma. What you see or don't see inside is always based on your level of spiritual maturity. So therefore, people will see many things. It's interesting. In the ancient days, especially in the African spiritual systems, a great deal of emphasis was put on morality. So much so that you would not even be educated if you could not display a certain degree of morality. The understanding was that any kind of knowledge is dangerous for an immoral person. Right? And so the ancient mystics will put a lot of emphasis on purifying our minds first, our intentions, our whole moral nature before they will give us any kind of practice that will result in a higher vision. Because some of the things you can't handle inside. You've been thinking perhaps that Jesus is the only begotten Son of God, and then you'll find inside 10,000 Jesuses. You can't handle that. You've been thinking that Lord Krishna is the light of the world, and then when you go in and you come out and you see that ant that you just barely missed with your footstep with Lord Krishna in a previous birth. You can't handle it. So it depends, sister. It depends. But all kinds of experiences. Inside of this body is the sum total of all possible experience. There is nothing that you will ever experience in any incarnation that is not already in existence here. That's really the truth. All your husband and wife, all your children that you ought to have, every experience you ought to have for another million births is in here. All recorded. All known. Yes, Santa.
I was just sitting up here thinking about a conversation which Lyle, if you don't mind me mentioning, Lyle and I had last week in terms of how these books just fool everyone into believing that once they read them that they're going to do this and do that and see visions of higher places and meet gurus and all that other stuff from the very beginning. It's just a blessing just to sit down and meditate. It's just a blessing to see yourself doing it. All this fantasy and what's that you're reading in these books is just pathetic. It doesn't make any sense for people to be on this high trip, whereas that just because they sit down, they expect a great reward. The reward is that you're doing it. The reward is that you have finally made up your mind that you want to introduce yourself to you. And it just amazed me about all these high questions in which that I hear people asking about various levels and planes of consciousness when you don't even want to sit down and introduce you to you. I don't get it. But yet and still, you know, you get these books and you get so fascinated. So as soon as you close your eyes, you want to go to the, just sitting down, just being there, just seeing how damaged, I don't know. I'm messed up.
You done too much meditation.
What can I tell you? I'm messed up. It amazed me to sit down. You know, that's an accomplishment when my mind permit me to sit down.
But you see, Sethra, you have to understand that you had yourself to go through a stage like that. Right, Chuck? Whether it was in this lifetime or the previous lifetime, but that's necessary. And remember, nothing's wrong with that so much. It's appropriate at certain stages of development. Because the Lord will use whatever means He can to induce you. Period. What do you think heaven is? Even at the level of religion, how do we get you to practice morality? And remember, the function of religion is to get you to practice morality. The function of religion is to prepare you for the practice of spirituality. And how is that done? Lure you with heaven. Oh, milk, honey, streets made of gold, long life, will live forever, immortality, never will die, see all your loved ones. Because how else are you going to get this foolish mind to move in any direction toward God? There's no choice. Sadhu, man, has to be led. Carrots have to be dangled. Sethra, you're speaking of advanced man, advanced one. They belong in a category by themselves. Those are bhaktas. Bhaktas don't even care whether they get any experience. They're not even involved in the experience. They're meditating because they love, period. Care what happens. Whether you give me an experience, whether you don't give me an experience, that's not the issue. Whether I go in, don't go in. But in the beginning, you see, where we start off at a level where the mind must follow some desire. That's how the mind is. The mind works off desire. And so we have to sometimes temper. The mystics sometimes have to speak to you about all of the tremendous, miraculous powers and all of the inner regions and things of that nature, just to get your attention, just to get us to move in that direction. And then once we start moving in that direction, then it becomes a different thing. You see? Yes, sister?
I'm curious about meditation. I haven't experienced any kind of high level or anything like that, but I think it's helped me. I was given an opportunity to do something with an old friend, and it always sounded like a lot of fun, you know, and I almost met this person, and I did, and it's like I kind of like had a moment to think, and I'm like, wait a minute now, you know, I'm kind of like putting myself in a path of temptation if I do that. You know what I mean? The self said, well, no, you don't have to worry, you can do it, but I thought about it, and I thought about my meditation. It's strange because if I had done this thing, even though I get up sometime, I'm way out, but still I get up to do what I have to do. It would have caused me not to be able to be at the place I should have been. And it was just so strange. I had to thank God. I said, now, if I wasn't meditating, I probably went out here. I mean, not that I was going to do anything that was damaging, but still, I would have put myself in a situation that I might have not liked the results of. But because I want to be faithful to my meditation, I thought about it and I couldn't do it. And I was just so thankful that I was in that. Because, I mean, a year ago I probably I had the opportunity to think about
that's the
that.
whole beauty of it. Remember we said earlier that meditation is a vehicle through which we are able to receive the help from above that we need in the life that we live. And so very often some of the most telltale signs of progress in meditation is not based so much on inner vision. It's outer vision. It makes you a better human being. Slowly you become a better human being. You see, you move into a state of sobriety. Recovery start taking place on this human level. You know, just on this human level. So the first signs of progress is always in this very world. You know, and you find those moments where you find that suddenly you got the strength to say no, where before you never had strength to say no. And that is a result of your meditation. You know, that remember I said that every time you sit and meditate, every time you discipline your attention in such a way that when it runs out to some distracted complex of thought and you withdraw your attention from that complex of distracting thought, return it to your object of dharana, concentration, right? You break a certain automaticity in your behavior. You transcend a piece of your condition. You liberate yourself a little bit from these mental habits that you had in the past. And you begin to find that one day you have the strength when a wave of anger hits you, that suddenly you are in control. It's strange, you see. You'll start finding that how come I'm not always, suddenly I've been in a pretty good mood for 2 or 3 days. What's wrong? You know, you start, why am I not? You don't know where it's coming from. All of those then are the benefits of meditation. And you see them manifest first on this level. It is never the case where you leap right in and you see all progress inside and none outside. It doesn't even work like that. The first level of improvement is out here. You start seeing it in the context of your relationships. You know, you start feeling it in you, in the way you live. Suddenly, things that once depressed the hell out of you don't depress you no more. Strange. Really. Things that happened to you that once made you just leap up and dance a jig and really, suddenly now it doesn't do that no more. You don't lose your balance so easily anymore. Whether something good happened or whether something bad happened. Something in you start remaining kind of calm. At first it's strange because you wonder, am I becoming indifferent? Am I bitter? Do I have any feelings? Or what's wrong with me? But something in you start remaining very calm, very even. You see, you're not so quick to be off balance anymore. You see, crises are coming, and they're coming towards you at the speed of light, but some in you, for the life of you, won't panic, and you don't know what's wrong with me because I should be panicking. But and there's nothing panicking in you no more. That is the result. Not what to say of meditation, even good satsang will produce that. Even good satsang will produce that kind of courageousness, you see. So, the first signs of progress in meditation, in satsang, is always experienced in our outward lives. And if you see that, then you know you're moving in the right direction. Then you know that. If you're following the system and you're becoming full of more fear, your nerves are getting worse, more stress, more tension, right? You're experiencing deeper disappointment, deeper frustration. Then that path is probably not for you. It may be for someone else, but the path for you will always render some peace, because that's what gives us peace. Peace comes from learning how to surrender. That's what gives us peace. And meditation teaches you how to surrender par excellence, because you're worshiping God with all thy mind, thy soul, and thy heart. Nothing is left to be involved in the world. Fully concentrated, fully focused. What I wanted to do as we end this session is that I want those who want any practical questions on their meditation, as how to sit, if your posture is right, advice about time, because I want some practical aspect. You know, I want you to get something out of these sessions, you see. I don't want it all to just be informational level, because going about meditation and meditating are entirely two different things. So I want you to feel free, and I'm going to stay around just a few minutes after we cut these cameras off. Some things we do not want to film. But to make sure that you are approaching your sadhana, make sure that you're approaching your abhyasa, your practices correctly. You can stop and you can come up and we can look and chat about it. Bilal, I think that's just about all for today. All right.